We asked the White House to provide us with a guest to discuss these developments. The White House declined our offer, which is just as well, because here with me is the Republican governor of New Jersey and former top Trump advisor, Christie. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Happy to be here.
Do you agree with Darrell Issa that a special prosecutor is needed?
No.
Why not?
No, I don't, because the Justice Department over the course of time has shown itself with the professionals that are there to have the ability to investigate these type of things. And I just think, Jake, and this is whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, we've seen it happen on both sides. When a special prosecutor gets involved, the thing gets completely out of control. And I think that doesn't serve anybody's purposes. We have a lot of important problems to deal with in this country. I'm not saying that's not one of them, but I believe the Justice Department can handle it.
Well, let's talk about the fact that White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus reached out to the FBI to try to get them to tell reporters or to issue a statement saying that the New York Times and CNN stories about the fact that the FBI was investigating these contacts was not true. As a former U.S. attorney, you must think that that's somewhat troubling, that somebody tied to the people being investigated reached out to those doing the investigation and said, hey, would you give a public relations statement on our behalf? Well,
I come at this, as you mentioned in your question, from a totally different perspective than maybe some others.
Right.
You know, when the FBI says anything to you, and if the story's to be believed as it was put forward, it was the FBI that first approached the chief of staff.
Right, the deputy said something about the story not being true.
Right, and so first off, I think the assistant director of the FBI has to be spoken to by Director Comey. He shouldn't even be initiating that kind of conversation, in my view. And if I were the U.S. attorney and that was an FBI agent or leader under my charge in the Newark or Camden offices, I would have sat them down and said, you're not to have those kind of conversations with people who could be in the orbit of an investigation, because you never know where an investigation is going to go. I think I bring a different sensibility to it. If I were sitting in that position, I just would say, you know what, talk to Don McGahn about that.
The White House counsel.
Right. If you got something to say about that, talk to the White House counsel about it out of an abundance of caution. Now, I don't think that Reince thought he was doing anything wrong. I really don't. And I have absolute confidence in his integrity. But you need to have the sensibility of a prosecutor when you're dealing with these issues, because perception matters.
Okay. And that's fair enough when it comes to the deputy director of the FBI. But what about the White House reaching out to the FBI to get a statement that would help them with this public relations matter about whether this was being investigated, and reaching out to the House and Senate chairman of the Intelligence Committee? If you'd been in that room, I have a tough time imagining you saying, oh yeah, right, it's a great idea. Reach out to the FBI, reach out to the chairman of the Intelligence Committees, try to get them to do your PR shop work for you.
Well, I think part of the problem here, though, Jake, is that we set up an atmosphere where you saw the reaction from the Democrats saying that somehow this takes these two really, I think, bright and distinguished people in the Intelligence Committee chairs and somehow disqualifies them from being able to run a good investigation. I think that's absolutely untrue. And this is why the Democrats have lost 2/3 of the state houses and the White House and the House and the Senate, because they overreach all the time. Now, what we should do here is take a deep breath and be able to look into these matters in a way that the American public will think has integrity to it. And so, from my perspective, it's the Democrats are a problem in overreaching on this stuff. And the sensibilities need to be tightened a little bit at the White House as well. But remember, these are all people who've never been in government before. And so they're going to need to learn these things. And I don't think you get the learning curve just by winning the election. You develop experiences over time which tell you that. I can guarantee you this. I don't think the chief of staff will ever have that kind of conversation with the FBI, with an FBI personnel again, nor should he. But again, Reince Priebus has great integrity. I don't think he did anything wrong, but I do think that it's something that perception matters, and we got to try it differently.
Do you think that President Trump is poorly served by the fact that there is no one in his inner circle who has ever run a government before? You have now run the state of New Jersey for 7 years. Experience comes with that experience, with those times, learning lessons and figuring out how government works. You're now talking about Reince Priebus learning on the job. He'll never make that mistake again. That's great, but he already did make it, and that's going to cloud Richard Burr. It's going to cloud the FBI, et cetera, to some people. Does President Trump need somebody around him who's run a government before?
Well, listen, I think the president needs people he's comfortable with. I mean, most importantly, and I know this as a chief executive, if you don't have trust in the people who are sitting around the table advising you, no matter what experience they have, you're not going to listen. So in the end, these are the president's calls to decide who will best serve him. And I think that that's his decision to make. And any of us sitting on the outside to try to tell him, you need to have this or you need to have that. I've known Donald Trump for 15 years. He's not going to take that kind of advice. What he wants are results. And the folks around him are going to have to start producing results for him that he is then could say to the American people, we're getting the job done. If that happens, no one's going to care about the issue of experience. If it doesn't happen, they will.
I'm sure you saw the president's tweets this morning attacking the New York Times, attacking the DNC. I have heard from Trump supporters in the last week or so who have expressed dismay to me because they see the president, in their view, addressing issues that have to do with his personal grievances. And not as engaged, at least on a superficial level, with the issues that will make a difference in their lives: jobs, trade, fighting ISIS, et cetera. I don't know if you've heard from people like that. I imagine you probably have, because you talk to a lot of people.
Yep.
What do you tell Trump voters who say he seems engaged in his feud with the New York Times? He doesn't seem engaged in what I voted for him for.
What I tell them is, you don't know Donald Trump. He barely sleeps. And so he can engage on a lot of different fronts and a lot of different battles at the same time. And to say he's not engaged in issues that matter is just wrong. He's had multiple meetings with CEOs, manufacturers, all kinds of people around the country to talk about jobs. Went to Boeing in South Carolina, engaged with them as well. Is engaging on ISIS, has set an executive order out that says, I want a plan to be able to take on ISIS and defeat them. He's done much in these first 40 days or so, Jake, that have been on the substance, on executive orders. Some people agree with them, some people don't, but you can't say they're not substantive. Now, he also has his other battles, like you just talked about. The amazing thing about Donald Trump that I've learned over the years is that he can engage in all these battles, and in fact, it energizes him. He likes a fight. I think we've all seen that. And when he engages, no matter whether it's with the New York Times or ISIS, whether it's with CNN or whether it's with the people who are exporting jobs out of the United States, it energizes him. This is a guy who doesn't need a lot of sleep, and as you can tell from the way he uses modern technology, that fact is being proven even when he's in the White House.
Lastly, sir, there are a lot of angry town halls we're seeing across the country. I have to say, I don't know anybody who has done more town halls than you. What do you say to congressmen, senators who are afraid of these angry crowds and either canceling or not even scheduling town halls? Welcome
to the real world of responsibility. I said to some folks the other night that for the first time, I hear members of the House not complaining when people don't know who they are. And that's on both sides of the aisle, and it's happened on both sides of the aisle. The fact is that right now the heat is on the Republicans. It's on us. And I said this at a meeting of the governors yesterday, that we asked for authority to change the country. We now have 2/3 of the state houses in America. We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the White House. It's now on us to produce results, and one of the things that we need to do is engage with the public. Now, we understand that a lot of these protesters are professional protesters, people with an agenda, okay? But you got to work through that, and you got to stand up, let them yell themselves out. In New Jersey, if I walked away from every town hall where I got yelled at, I would have never done one.
How many have you done?
I've done over 160 town halls during my time as governor.
Were some of those people professionals? Were some of those people?
Sure. The unions, teachers union in particular, sent lots of people with T-shirts and signs that were pre-made and that were taking me on in a big way and in an inaccurate way. And I understand why members of Congress don't like it, but you know what? You asked for the job. Go do it.
Governor Chris Christie, always good to see you, sir. Thank you so much.